chapter number 5. Let me know you're about ready to turn that on, and I will. It's on. Well, good day, everybody. Thanks for coming in. And it's a cold and wet and rainy day here in Loganville today. But we are going to dig into the Word of God. It's Wednesdays in the Word. And 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we're going to go over 4 verses or so here. And as we've been walking through the book of Romans on Sundays, understanding that Apostle Paul being the author there, we're going to see some other things in some of his other letters that he writes to like the Church of Corinth here today. And he's constantly giving instruction and constantly giving encouragement, and he's constantly giving his push for making sure that we do what we do because of who Christ is in our life. Paul's life was revolutionized. Sometimes I think we lose sight of what he came from. He was a changed man. Talk about change in somebody. When he had his conversion there, road to Damascus, I mean, from that day forward, he was just an ambassador. And he grew so much, and he helped so many. I think sometimes when people have that drastic of a ideology, that change of spirit, of heart, with what the Holy Spirit does, it does radicalize people to want to be that much more faithful. And so this morning, I want to talk a little bit about things that keep us from staying faithful in our hearts, our minds, our attitudes, our words, our actions. Those 5 things kind of round out our lives in so many ways. Things are manifested through that. Our hearts, what's going on inside, our minds, what's going on in our thinking, our attitude. I mean, we deal with these things every single day. You have to choose your attitude. You have to choose your actions. You have to choose what you think about. You have to choose how you feel. And so those things are so important, but there are a lot of things that keep us from staying faithful in those 5 areas of our life. Fear keeps us sometimes from staying faithful in our thinking. We start to worry, and we start to fret a little bit and stress a little bit. Frustration, is another thing that fights those. We get frustrated over an incident, over an issue, and therefore then all of a sudden, we're not really faithful in the way that we respond to people or the way that we think. Failure is another thing that keeps us from being where we ought to be in those 5 areas. And all 3 of those are emotions, plus more. Fear and frustration and failure are emotions that we go through. And they're often the manifestation of losing sight of what we as Christians are supposed to focus on, right? They come out in so many different ways. And I wrote the statement, when we focus our love on Christ, everything else should get a little more blurry, right? I have been dealing with this stuff. So frustrating. I fought it forever, until my arms got too short to put it out here, right? And I've told you, I wear contacts. If I didn't wear contacts, I couldn't count how many people are here, basically. I mean, it's bad. And I've never had an issue before with my contacts reading something up close. Well, now, if I want to see far away, I can't see close up. It's the most frustrating thing. If I don't have my contacts in, then I can't see far away, but I could pull a piece of sliver of a shard of a metal, out of my hand, no problem at all. Can y'all do that? Who can see without any assistance? You can see up close, no problem at all. Raise your hand. So all y'all have to have glasses right now. Have to have help, right?
She got she got different lenses and different eyes.
Yeah, right.
Not contact. Permanent.
Gotcha. Like a LASIK type of a thing?
No, it's
Oh.
what old people have.
Oh, cataracts? Yeah, okay, yeah, right. So, so now, I've gotten a pair of glasses because of frustrating. I got a pair of glasses now that that is clear up top. I can see right through it. It doesn't have no prescription, and at the bottom of it helps me with my contacts in as a reader. And so, but it's crazy because it happened overnight. I mean, like yesterday I was saying fine. You know what I'm saying? That's the way I feel about that. And now trying to get things in focus sometimes is often hard. But when I begin to focus on something, everything else does get a little more blurry, right? I can hone in on that. When I'm shooting a gun or something, I can focus in on what but everything else ought to be a little bit blurry. It should be grasping my attention right there. And that's why I say when we focus our love on Christ, then every other aspect of life, it ought to blur up a little bit. It can't be as clear, right? Because that's actually what's supposed to happen. Modern day phones. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you should, when you go to your phones, they have a thing called portrait mode. You ever seen that? Do you know what that is? So portrait mode is, I should have did this on the top, but on portrait mode, your face can be ultra clear, but it kind of blurs everything out behind it. It just kind of brings a sharpness and a crispness to it, right? And so again, when we focus on Christ, right, then everything else goes blurry. So let me ask you a question. When was the last time that you did something for the Lord simply because you love Him? I'm not looking for an answer here. But ask yourself, when was the last time I did something for God? Just because I love Him. With your spouse in here. And everybody in here has a spouse, today. Sometimes you just do things because you love your spouse, right? Maybe you buy something. Maybe you swing by and pick up something. Maybe you do something, like, why'd you do that? It's because I love you, right? Have a little love burst for you today and just wanted to do it, right? That's the way it ought to be in a healthy relationship. And so the question is when was the last time we did something like that for God? And I'd hate to admit there are more times than not where what I do for the Lord is sometimes done out of habit. It's done out of pride. Maybe it's even done out of guilt. Where I do something for God because I hadn't really been as faithful as I ought to be here lately. And so I do something, right? Or maybe I do something so others could see it, right? That would be an element of pride, right? Or out of habit rather than just strictly out of love, right? I mean, there are times we get our spouses things at certain occasions because that's what we're supposed to do, right? It's kind of expected. But it's the in-betweeners, right, that make a difference and that really step out. And so I think sometimes as a result of that, that's why sometimes I get tired and aggravated and impatient, start to wane in my commitments to Him a little bit. That's why sometimes I get frustrated at the system, whatever the system is in our lives, because what we're doing is not done strictly out of love. And I get it. There are times where we have to do stuff out of duty. And there are things we do things out of habit. There are things that we do things. But the feelings of uselessness, you ever feel that? And I think that's an age thing. Wouldn't you agree a little bit? There are some very successful people in here. In your day, in your prime, business-wise or whatever, you were important. The company counted on you. You were the mover and the shaker. And I think once we start what you said mattered. People listened to you, whether they had to or not. They listened to your voice. And now that you maybe don't have that role in your life, some people really struggle with that. And the struggle is, I don't feel as important as I used to. I don't feel as needed as I used to. And I know I've counseled a lot and older and people, and it's like, well, my kids are gone now. They don't really need me. They use me for the kids necessarily, but they don't really need me. I don't really contribute much like I used to at this or that. And I think that feeling, is, I think that's why sometimes when people retire, step away, they really have a struggle with that. And like, wait a minute, because now I'm not that important anymore to anybody. I just kind of there doing my thing. You would think, yes, not everybody's counting on me. I don't have the responsibility anymore. You would feel like that would take a sense of pressure off of you. But I've talked with pastors, once they've stepped out of the pastor and resigned, and it's like, man, I'm just there. You ask questions like, why am I doing this, or is this really all worth this? And at those times in my life where my commitment to Him may be in question. But here's the thing. Our motive for why we do what we do is wrapped up in our love for Him. And it should be, right? I want to show you a passage that can help us with that here in the next few minutes that we've got here. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Look in verse number 12. The Bible reads, "For we commend not ourselves again unto you, but give you an occasion to glory on our behalf, that ye may have somewhat to answer them which glory in appearance and not in heart. For whether we be beside ourselves, it is God, or whether we be sober, it's for your cause." Verse 14 kind of is where I want to get to. He says, "For the love of Christ constraineth us." I'm going to break that word down. The love of Christ constraineth us. He says, because we thus judge that if one died for all, then we're all dead. And that He died for all, that they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves, but unto Him which died for them and rose again. And so what he's talking about here is our identity in Christ and our love of Christ. And so if you look at verse number 14, by definition, the love of Christ does three things for us, if you're going to take notes. The first thing it does is it compresses us. It compresses us. The word constraineth brings with it the idea of compressing something, a closeness, if you will, a bringing together. I think of making a snowball. You take that loose snow, and if it's good snow, there's enough moisture in there, but not too much, where but there's enough moisture where it comes together, and you can just, and when you get through of it, when I was in Arkansas earlier this year preaching, they had a bunch of snow on the ground left over, and I had walked up to go to eat somewhere, and these kids right there having a snowball fight. Man, that was all I need. I jumped right in there with them. I was like, man, this is good snow too. The snow that we had a good snowball consistency with it. We had our own snowball fight at our house. And that's kind of feel you kind of press it down, right? You bring it together right there. And it's the same word in the Greek that's used in Luke 8. It says, remember Jesus walking through the crowd, and the woman with the issue of blood touched out to Him, right? And he's like, who touched me? And when Peter asked Him, Master, the multitudes throng Thee, right? They're coming, they're compressing around you. The word is suneko. They're compressing you and coming around you. And you're asking who touched you. So, in other words, the love of Christ ought to bring us closer to Him. It compresses us with Him and to him, right? And so to have that proper level of commitment in our lives, we must throng him, right? We must be drawn closer to him and be compressed to him. That's why our walk with him, that's why our fellowship with him, our devotion to the Lord is so important in our lives. It's why we sing songs like Just a Closer Walk with Thee, right? Because we want to stay close to him. We want to compress. We want to, the love of Christ, it ought to be right there. That's how we should want to live our lives. But not only does the love of Christ compress us, it also compels us. And that's another definition for the word constraineth here. Paul states that Christ's love for us, and consequently our love and Paul's love for Christ, compels him or forces him to be committed. The word brings the idea of obligation. Is kind of what it's saying right there. John states it in 1 John, hereby perceive we the love of God, because he had laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brethren here. So Christ's love that converted him has now compelled him. That's why Paul is so bent, because he feels compelled. Remember what he said? We read it, I taught on it about 2 weeks ago. I am a debtor, both to the Jews and the Greeks, right? And so Paul and the other apostles took their model of service, their model of commitment from the Lord himself. Because he taught them that, right? The thought process, look, the reason we serve God and lay our lives on the lines for other men is because that's what he did for us. And so that was naturally taught with them. Paul didn't see his commitment to Christ as just that's a good idea. I think I just want to be committed. No, he didn't think it was just a noble gesture, right? No, he understood the level of commitment. He understood the love that Christ had for us, and that it forced him, it obligated, it compelled him to love Christ and to live for Christ. Paul looked at that as like, man, I owe him something. I owe him something. And when someone does something for us special, we have this we should, as Christians, have this inner feeling of, I just really want to, I'm obligated. I feel like I need to do this, right, for them because of what they did for us. Paul said, I am debtor, both to the Greeks or barbarians, both to the wise and unwise. And why? Because of the power of the gospel that's in me. I'm not ashamed of that. And I believe that if we would see ourselves in the same light that Paul saw himself as a debtor, that we would have less trouble committing ourselves to the Lord. We just like, you know what? Why I'm doing this is because he did way more for me than I could ever pay back, right? And so let's look at a third thing here, talking about our love for Christ. It should compress us. It should compel us. We also see that it completes us. This is a third definition in the Greek for the word constraineth us. In other words, it helps us know who we are in Christ and why we do what we do for Christ. And again, that's the basis for why I'm preaching through Romans at this point, to understand this. When we understand the love of Christ, it completes us. It makes us whole. It keeps us faithful. Let's go back to the spouses here, right? When you understand and sense and you have that love from your spouse, it completes you. Does it not? Like, there's nothing else that I need to complete that desire, that longing that I have. When I know my wife loves me genuinely, authentically, the way she does, I don't need anything else. You know, I don't have to go looking outside of my marriage for that companionship and friendship and completeness. It's whole there. That's why when you lose a spouse, how many times have you heard people say, I just feel like there's only half of us walking around. I'm uneasy. I'm not complete, right? There's a part of me missing. You've heard that phrase. Well, indeed there is, because the love right there, I mean, admit it, you know, whether we admit it or not, And I know you guys have your own disagreements and, and frustrations and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, you'd be lost without your spouse. In so many ways. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you can function, you can get on, but it's like the little thises and the that's and the day-to-day stuff. It's just, I was thinking about this last night. I was traveling home and I was thinking, man, if something happened to my wife, I'd be a wreck. And a lot of times she'll say, talking about the kids' doctor's appointments or young when they were their shots or field trip permission forms and all this kind of stuff. She goes, you don't have a clue about any of that stuff, do you? I'm like, no, not really. Because that's what you do. I don't have to use that bandwidth of my brain because, Mama, you're taking care of that, right? She said, what if something happened to me? I'm like, honey, let me tell you something. If something happened to you, I would switch another gear. I'd make it happen. It would be just another thing. I handle a lot of stuff. Dentist appointments would just be another thing on my list, right? I can make it happen. Now, I had to hire 3 people to cover your spot, but I can get it done, right? Karen would become a personal secretary at that point. No, you move into gear. You do it, right? You do what you need to do to make it happen. And I think anybody would do that. But there are some things we're not going to have to engage in right now because we don't have to, right? I don't know how you do Christmas presents, things like that, but my wife does a lot of the children's and grandchildren's now, peeking out things on those lines. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that, or whatever? Great, yeah, fine, super. I handle hers. I handle an aspect of from me and her to the kids or whatever, but she handles all the incidentals and the littles and just whatever. I'm not even going to think about it because she's going to do that. And when it comes to that, it makes us whole, right? We have that, and that's the love that we have with each other. I'm complete with her, and she's complete in me, and that's the same thing that I'll be with Christ. So remember what I stated in the beginning, that our love of Christ involves the motive of our commitment, right? So my motive for why I do what I do is wrapped up in my love for him. That's what compels me, right? That's what compresses me, right? That's what completes me. Because I know who he is and what he's done in my life. That aspect of it helps me understand this is why you do it, because of what he's done for me. To illustrate this, and this is Paul again, and we'll look at 1 Timothy, or 2 Timothy chapter 1 right quick. 2 Timothy chapter 1. Look at verse 7. He says, for God hath not given us a spirit of fear. By the way, this is a good verse, right? 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. Yeah, I think I said 1 Timothy. I meant to say 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. But God hath not given us the spirit of fear. And by the way, Paul constantly lived in danger for his life. He was shipwrecked 3 times, bit by a snake. He went through it, right? But he said, God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power. He said, of love, of a sound mind. These are things that God has given us. So he says, be not thou therefore ashamed of the testimony of his Lord. He says, and for that matter, nor me of his prisoner. Yeah, I'm a prisoner, but you don't have to be ashamed of that. Be thou a partaker of the affliction of the gospel according to the power of God, who hath saved us. He's called us with a holy calling, not according to our works and what we've done. That's not why he wants to use us, but according to his own purpose and grace. I mean, God has a plan for you, he's saying. God has a direction for you. He wants to fulfill you. It was given to us in Christ Jesus before the world began. We all have purpose in our life. And it goes back to that idea I was talking about of needlessness, that feeling that sometimes we have. Well, it will overcome us if we allow it to, but we have to understand, I'm a firm believer that until God is through with us and our purposes here on earth, we're going to still be alive. I believe when he's like, okay, job done, then I think they said, all right, time to come to the house. Right? And so if you're still here and taking up airspace, right, then God's a purpose for you. So we shouldn't allow that feeling of uselessness or needlessness come over our lives. Okay, God has a purpose for me. Now that takes you on another tangent. All right, what is it now? What is it in my stage of life now? How can what is it, God, that you would have us as a couple or us as a family or me as an individual? How would you have me to serve you now? Look, retirement is to be enjoyed, but that doesn't mean we check out on life, especially on the spiritual side of things, right? That's almost a time where it's okay, I got more time to do things for the Lord now. Where are they? Where are they? Right? He says, he called us according to his purpose there in verse 9, which was given us Christ Jesus before the world began, but is now made manifest or made known by the appearing of our Savior Jesus Christ, who abolished death. He got rid of that, the spiritual death. He brought life. He brought immortality to life through the gospel. In other words, we're saved. We're going to live forever. Whereunto, he said, I'm appointed a preacher, an apostle, a teacher of the Gentiles, for the which cause I also suffer these things. He said, nevertheless, I'm not ashamed, for I know, and that's the key phrase, I want you to get there. He says, for I know whom I have believed. There's no question in my mind. I'm not following something here haphazardly or blindly. I know who I'm believing and am persuaded, he says. Now, he's able to keep everything I've committed him against that day. He's going to keep me. He's going to preserve me. And so Paul was understanding this is why I do what I do. It's based on my love for him. I want to show you something else that revolutionized my focus on this passage right here. Look at verse number 12. Paul does not say, for I know what I have believed. He says, I know whom I have believed. That's a big difference right there. You know, a lot is going on in the political world today, and the Constitution, is being upheld. And, I believe the Constitution. I believe the Constitution. It's a constitutionary right, blah, 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 blah. That's a thing. Wouldn't it be nice if our politicians say, hey, I know who we serve. I know who we serve, not what I serve, right? Lest we get too caught up in the what of our beliefs, we got to look at the whom of our beliefs. For example, I believe in the sanctity of marriage. Amen? I believe. I love all the benefits. I love all the blessings of being married. But that's not what keeps me married to Michelle. It's not the added on, not the benefits of it. It's not her goofy personality. It's not her laugh. It's not all those things right there. It's not what she is. It's the whom that I married, right? That keeps me married. That's an important difference right there. It's my love for her, not my love of being married. I love all the aspects of being married. I honestly would hate to be on the scene again. You know what I mean? Can you imagine? Now, I'm young enough at this point that if something tragically would happen to my wife, I would be looking for companionship. It was just, I would have to do that. We've talked about this. Every funeral I preach, this is a conversation when we leave. My wife and I have this dozens and dozens of times. Now, something happens to me, you go find somebody, right? I'm telling you, baby, you can do it. And marry for money this time. Don't marry for all this. You know what I mean? Marry for money. And she goes, I am. I promise you that, And the same thing, It's like, let me get cold and then go, right? Just go. I love being married, and I love all that, but it's really, that's not what keeps me married. I'm married because of her. It's the whom in my marriage that keeps me married. It's my love for her. It's not my love of being married. I just don't walk around and say, I'm married. I'm married. No, I don't say that. I'm like, man, I'm married to the most incredible woman you've ever met in your life. Let me show you a picture of her, right? There's no satisfaction of being married. Some people might. It's my love for her, not my love of being married. And so there's a difference right there, right? My commitment to my marriage and my wife is not based on the what's of the marriage. It's based on the who of the marriage. And because of that love for my wife, I'm willing to go through the ups and downs in a relationship. I'm willing to boy, we're really G-hauling, and when we're not in my marriage, I'm willing to go through that. I love the individual of my marriage more than I love the idea of being married. Now, if something happened to her, it would probably shift back to, I love the idea of being married, because the individual is not there yet, right? But if that were to ever happen, and Lord would bring someone in my life or whatever, and again, I can't even imagine going on the dating scene again. It would be absolutely horrific. I would probably task that to my daughters and say, all right, go find me somebody, right? Bring me your top 5 candidates, and we'll go from there. You know what I mean? I can't even imagine going there again, having to get dressed up and go meet somebody for a cup of coffee.
We don't want to disappoint you, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, because the Lord's coming back.
The daughters and the granddaughters will not allow that.
Well,
Ours has already told us.
really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we've talked about that with our kids. We have had that conversation, and because of that, I've known people who, and I've counseled a lot of families that it was not good. It was not healthy, right? But oftentimes that's the case because mom or dad, they kind of go off the deep end a little bit, and in their grief or whatever, and they had to do a lot of crazy things. And we've tried to prep our kids, look, if something were to ever happen, at this age, I said now later on, we don't know, but at this age, something would happen, Dad would probably have to try to find a wife, but not a mom. And mom wouldn't have to try to find a dad. She would have to find a husband. You guys are old enough now. We understand that. We wouldn't try to replace that because we can never do that. We never can replace mom in our life. But at some point after that, mom or dad would have to try to find a husband or a wife. Now, when it comes down to that, how's that going to work? I have no idea. It might be World War III, right? But I'm a firm believer if I engage them, invest in them early, if they have a little say in the deal, a little ownership, then maybe that. And again, I hope all that I talk about is in vain and that never happens. I told my wife that we were talking about this. I was like, why don't we just go together? Let's just, in the rapture. You good with that? She's like, yeah, that's fine. We change the subject and move on, right? I love the individual of my marriage more than I love the idea. In healthy relationships, there are normal expectations from both parties, right? I have certain expectations from my wife. She has certain expectations of me. And there are times when neither of us necessarily want to meet those expectations. It's the human nature of things, right? And can I get a witness on that? I mean, it just happens. However, our love and our affection, our adoration for the other whom in our relationship trumps our own selfish desires, right? It constrains us to be faithful and to be committed one to another, as it should be in our relationship with Christ. So our love for the whom, Jesus Christ, should trump our selfish little pity parties that we have. Right? We're talking about in a relationship here. And we get over it in our spouse's relationship. We get upset. They hurt our feelings. They say something. They don't say something. And we kind of, wasn't nice? That's kind of how it goes now. It's not really a knockdown. I mean, maybe it is in your house. I don't know. It's not really a knockdown, drag out. It's more of a poochy lip, pity party, and kind of being kind of quiet. And what's wrong? Nothing. It's just kind of, it's a feelings hurt kind of thing, right? And we get over it, though, right? We kind of realize why am I feeling this way? It's so dumb. Yes, you should have got me something other than a Shark vacuum cleaner for. But we get beyond that, right? The same thing happened with us with Christ. We can't get down, mope around. God just doesn't use me anymore. I feel so lonely. I'm not feeling used. No, our love for Him should take over those selfish desires and those little feel sorry for yourself kind of thing, constrain us to be faithful and committed to Him. I think I wrote it this way. Sometimes we love the idea of being saved more than we love the intimacy in our salvation. I'll say that again. Of course, that's Christ. We love the idea of being saved more than we love the intimacy of our relationship. See, we love the fact that we'll miss hell. We love the fact that we'll go to heaven when we die, right? We love the fact that we will, live with Him forever, no more sorrow, no more tears, no more pain. We love that aspect of it. But sometimes I think we obscure the fact that our salvation is not really about us. It's about Him. I mean, salvation brings us this. It's not like marriage. The relationship brings us benefits to the relationship, right? I don't have to, she loves me for who I am and how I look and all this kind of stuff, right? And we love that part of it. When it comes to our relationship with Christ, we love all these benefits, not going to hell, right? Having a future with Him, all that, which is awesome. But honestly, it's all about Him. He bled, right? He suffered. He died. He rose again. Not so that we can live eternally within ourselves, but with Him, right? He did it so we can live with Him. He's the one that wants us. There's that relationship. He's like, I'm going to do this for them because I love them. I want to spend eternity with them, right? It's all for His glory. It's not for our glory. And we oftentimes just get this idea that salvation is just about me. God did this so I can live forever. And I've been guilty of that. But salvation, there's more to salvation than just heaven and living with Him eternally. I mean, He wants us to live it here, right? Look at the last part of our text, and we'll be through here, verse 14 and 15. The love of Christ constraineth us, because we thus judge that if one died for all, then we were all dead. Look at verse 15. And that He died for all, that they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves. You see that? He's very clear. But live unto Him which died for them and rose again. Let me read that again. I want you to think about this. The love of Christ constraineth us, because we thus judge that if one died for all, then we're all dead. And here's what he says. Now, and that He died for all, that they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves. What I just said, right? He didn't do it for us. He did it for Himself. We get the benefit of it. But unto Him which died for them and rose again. Eternity will not have us living for ourselves forever and ever, right? But we'll be living for Him. We're living with Him. Revelation 5 says, I beheld and heard the voice of many angels round about the throne and the beast and the elders. And the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. That's a lot. Verse 12, saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb. That's what we're going to be saying. That was slain, received power and honor and riches and strength and glory and blessing. And every creature is in heaven, on the earth and under the earth, and such as are in the sea and all that are in them, I heard I saying, blessing and honor and glory and power, He says, be unto Him that sitteth upon the throne and unto the Lamb forever and ever. Again, all this is about Him. It's not about us. And in a healthy relationship, we've talked about this many times, it really is if we will yield ourselves to our spouses and they do the same thing for us, it's a win-win, right? Once we get that straightened out in our minds, because right here there's no mention of any Christian being worshipped or praised, is there, in Revelation? It doesn't say He's going to put us on a pedestal. No. We're the ones that are going to be worshiping. We're the ones that are going to be praising Him at that point. And once we get that straightened out in our minds, we can then see that He is the only one that we should follow. It will make our commitment to Him. It will make our commitment to Him last, endure, be worthwhile, enough to get us to the difficult times, the ups and downs in our relationships. In closing then, verse 15. And they died for all, and they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves. I wonder if any of us today in here are living unto ourselves. It's really about us, our needs, our desires, our wants. We lose focus on who He is. Remember I said our love of Christ ought to make everything else blurry in our lives. And when we do that, then we're not living unto ourselves. But when we throw ourselves in the mix, it causes issues in the relationship with Christ, just like it does in our spouses. When you start getting your feelings hurt, you don't feel like you have the respect that you should deserve, when they are doing their own thing, their own hobbies, and not spending as much time with you as you think they ought to, and that when things go south a little bit, you're not paying me any attention. You're not loving on me like you should. You haven't been as snuggly. What's going on? Am I right? And we kind of get our focus off ourselves, and that's when we start having these little pity parties, and because our focus is on us and our needs. And it's important, but a lot of times that goes to living unto ourselves. And when we live unto ourselves in relationship, it's not going to make it better, whether it's with each other or with Christ. Any thoughts on this verse? The love of Christ constraineth us. It completes us. It compresses us, compels us. And if you relate it to your relationship with your spouse, you can see how important it is, the relationship with Christ. Anybody got any commentary?
I have a note in the second. I wrote it down. It says holiness trumps happiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've made that statement at some point. He didn't save us to make us happy. He saved us to make us holy. That's the whole sanctification aspect of it. I remember using that phrase at one point. Holy, it's holy, that's not happiness. They're very good. Anything else? You know, one day I'm just going to have y'all teach the class to me, so I can learn from y'all about that.
No, you kind of.
Tell you what, let me go ahead and show thank y'all for tuning in and watching, and we will see you next time. God bless you.